Hi, Chris Peak. Chris Garcia.
Hey,
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second ever episode of Duende Discussions. I'm your host, Megan. This is my incredible guest, Chris Garcia Peak. How are you, dude?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me on this.
Of course. I'm so excited. We just spent an hour and a half trying to figure out mic situations. We almost gave up. We almost
We
gave up,
almost did, but we didn't.
but we
We're
didn't.
good. I'm
So
drinking my Duende cocktail.
right. We made Duende cocktails. Mine's a mocktail, but do you want to say, I said, Chris,
Oh, I
such an
didn't know there's
amazing,
supposed to be mocktails.
no, they don't have
No,
to.
I'm kidding.
No, I welcome the
I
the
I made
alcohol
mine as a hot
cocktail.
toddy. I made mine hot, so it's a
Hot
little
toddy. Okay, so
yeah.
why is that? We're just gonna launch right into that. Why is that Duende? Why is that your Duende drink?
Well, I called this blood. What did I call this? Blood and death.
Blood and
And
death?
so it is red wine with honey,
Mm,
orange, a little brandy, and actually a little whiskey. And
mm, hot.
then little warmed though. So
That
I
sounds
thought it was a
amazing.
pretty, yeah.
Is
And
it?
it's in my disaster mug. Do you see my mug? It has like disaster themes.
It's like blue. Is that Swedish? Like
Yeah, it's supposed to be like a take on that, that type of art style, but everything is kind of like disasters.
people? Disasters. Which specific disaster is that?
Well, they're all kind of crazy things. Like there's Bigfoot and like so they're all you have to kind of look a little deeper into
Why is Bigfoot a disaster?
it. I don't
That looks
know.
beautiful. Listeners, he's holding up a mug with blue and white medieval type etching with
Yeah.
disasters all over it. Okay, let me get my duende drink.
Yeah, what did you make?
I made black cherry cream soda with non-alcoholic red wine and a dash of pomegranate grenadine.
Ooh, that looks really
I
good.
thought it is really good. It's very sweet. I
It's
thought
very
it,
dark.
yes, like blood. The blood of the earth,
The blood of the earth.
like Lorca says. So we're going to be sipping these throughout.
Yes.
I wish I could do, I just feel like this would go off the rails if I had alcohol because I'm so sensitive to alcohol these days.
Oh, really?
But maybe it should go off the rails.
Maybe that's what you need.
Everybody, Chris Christie is an amazing director, a visionary artist, an experimenter. What else? You are the head of an arts company, Cock and Bull, incredible. And we met in grad school at the theater school at DePaul University back in the turn of the century.
Yeah, a long time ago we met. Yes.
Yeah,
Thanks for that. Yes, and you are a visionary playwright.
thank you.
So those are some big words to live up to, I guess.
What, of course, that's nothing compared to your skill and talent and duende duderness. So we met at school and we connected through our weirdness.
How did we? I know. I was like, how did we get? We just always kind of hit it off.
Yeah, we
We
like
just,
the same type of strange, provocative
right.
art. And then we kept in touch after. And then,
We've been friends like this whole time.
yeah,
That's like
you've been such an encourager of my
20
work.
years. Yeah.
Yes. As a playwright, as a weirdo playwright, I don't think I'm that weird, but some people think what I write is weird. As more poetic and lyrical, I guess I should say, experimenter, you've always understood me so well and what I was trying to do and supported it and supported that experiment. So thank you. And that's why we how we connected. You directed, or no, you did a few readings when I was first starting to become a playwright, when I was changing from dramaturg to playwright in 2005. And then remember my harmonica play? Remember the
Yeah. I remember we did a staged reading of your harmonica play in Evanston, I think, right?
yes. Mary Pearl was the lead. She was incredible. And Mark played the harmonica on stage. Mark Pracht.
And I think
And
we did a reading somewhere else of another play,
yeah, my poetry play
right?
about poet
And
Chicago based on the love triangle between the Wordsworths and Samuel Taylor
oh,
Coleridge.
that's right. Yeah. And then I had talked to you about doing a kind of Grand Guignol piece, and
You
I
started
think
Serpentine Pink?
inspired you. Yeah,
Oh,
inspired
because
you
of
for Serpentine
you.
Pink.
It's all because of you. Thank
And
you.
it was, yeah, oh, well, it was such a cool play. And then we did
Lecherous honey.
Lecherous Honey.
Oh,
Wait,
it's
we just say it again. Ready?
our lecherous
Lecherous
honey.
Honey.
Tastes like honey. But that was
Honey.
that was an adaptation of Ibsen's Ghosts.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that was at the Burger Mansion, the haunted Burger Mansion.
Haunted Burger Mansion. Talk about Duende. I mean, I think of that,
For sure.
for Ibsen, for me, is full Duende.
Okay, wait.
Which,
So
yeah. Am I
so
getting going too far ahead? Yeah.
no, my fault. This isn't even alcoholic, and I'm
That's not alcoholic.
so off the rails. No, so, so yes, so Duende discussions where we talk about Duende and how the guest artist, is affected by Duende, what it means to them. So yeah, I should just let you talk about it. But basically, I would talk in the last episode, and in the intro, I talk about my definition. It's basically the same as Lorca's, but just a visceral art energy that is conjured when an artist is making contact with their most authentic self, which can be blessed or bloody. Mm.
Mhm.
And but also it's like an internal beast of inspiration, creativity that you wrestle with or fight with or make friends with or whatever when you're trying to be a creator. So that's what my definition. So what does it mean to you? And you can integrate that with the Ibsen comment as well if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for me, thinking about Duende and kind of connecting it a bit to Lorca, I think a lot of Lorca's focus on Duende was about flamenco,
Mhm.
right? And this connection to flamenco. And I was in Sevilla, Spain, a couple of years ago, several years
Right.
ago, and saw lots of different flamenco, some very traditional and some non-traditional. And even though their form was different, the content was very much the same, where it was full Duende,
Mhm.
basically. So, and I think what that means to me is possession.
Ooh.
And I think of Duende as being possessed and having to get something out of you. You have to expel something out of you. And
Mhm.
somehow it's undefinable a bit, but it's like the forces of like good and evil that have to come out of you.
Right.
And I think like in flamenco, it's about this embodiment of that, right? It's this
Mhm.
physicality. And I think in, the work that I'm attracted to, the work I've done with my company Cock and Bull over the years, it was really about telling a story. It was like being possessed to tell a story, like
Right.
possessed. Possession where it's like, it's not necessarily a good thing,
Mhm.
where it's so conflicting, but
Right.
it's like it has to come out of you. You've got to tell the story. You've got to tell this.
Held. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's how I kind of think of it, like that, like really simple terms, I guess.
Okay. And have you ever when did you first feel that? When you Just as an artist, when did you first feel that? Or have you? Have you felt that when you're creating art or when you're experiencing another's art?
I've definitely felt it experiencing others' work, and but I would say rarely at times.
Mhm.
And I definitely have experienced Duende. I'm in full Duende when I have done everything with Cock and Bull.
Mhm.
And I think that is why I've spent a lot of my life like fighting, producing and creating work
Mhm.
because I think it's so hard. I've spent a lot of time not creating work
So hard.
because
Yeah,
it's so hard,
it is so hard.
right? And not hard
Especially
just from a
for
technical aspect, but just that duende is
exhausting.
so difficult. Yeah.
It's literally when Lorca describes it as wrestling, like you wrestle, he says
Yes.
the true
Yes.
struggle is with the duende. And I think that's true. It is, it's exhausting, especially for experimental boundary pushing work like what you guys do. It's when it's you have to do that, and then you have to also confront the truth that sometimes audiences aren't ready for it. Sometimes investors, people who you need to rely on to make the art actually happen, they don't trust it or they're scared of it, they're worried about it. So it's a risk. And that's what's
Yeah.
great about Duende and Lorca because when you take risks, some revelations happen. They always say to do what scares you the most because that's so truthful and authentic. But it's also financially it can be a risk. And arts in America, I mean, I don't need to tell you about it. You know so well. And so that's another, has that ever hindered your duende? The truth that arts arts funding in America doesn't necessarily generate duende inspired work because it's so risky.
Yeah, I think it influences you a bit from the production aspect, right? So you're kind of, I kind of go into everything kicking and screaming. Like I have to be literally forced or shoved off a cliff to actually create something. And and it's because of exactly what you said. It's that risk, but it's not like the production financial risk. It's the risk, it's the emotional risk.
Oh, yeah.
It's because I know what's going to happen to me once I'm in
Mhm.
it. And there's something really amazing and contagious about that. Like I love when I work on a project when I get designers who are also in kind of duende mode.
Mhm.
And we
You
are
always
all,
curate incredible designers. The experience of watching the cock and bull work, the design is integral to the experience in the story. I mean, it is for a lot of work, but for yours especially, it's almost it's almost like it's as important as the story.
yeah, completely. It's always been equally important to me. Like it's a part of the entire experience. And it's something that, when I guess when I've been working on something where it's like I have to get this out. We've got to tell this story. We've got to get it out. Like when we worked on our piece, Lecherous Honey, it was, definitely like, you know, I felt compelled that we had to tell this story of, when, connecting it back to Ibsen. I remember you and I speaking, we were like, well, we should do a project together. What should we do? And we were like, well, I'm reading Ibsen. And you were like, I'm reading Ibsen. And, but it was so cool because I think of, Ibsen for me is full duende too. Like Ibsen left, what was it? He left Norway, right?
19th
And,
century Norwegian playwright. Yeah.
right. And yeah. And he leaves Norway uh, and goes to, I think he lives in Italy when he writes all of his plays
Right.
to get away from the Norwegian, community and background because but all of his plays are about communicating and telling the story of what's going on in his community or what was happening in his community.
Like he still kept connecting.
Yeah.
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 The
Still kept,
duende of his homeland wouldn't leave him.
right. Yeah. And compelled to tell these stories,
Mhm.
compelled to tell these stories. And I think that is what is so, when we talk about so Lecherous Honey it was ghosts, but interpretation of ghosts.
Ibsen's Ghost, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just Ghosts is so compelling. I mean, even when we read it, we're reading an English translation. It is still the story is so compelling. And I think that was, for us, it was about getting the story, who was one of the lead characters, Helene Alving, right? It was telling her version of the story. And I
Right.
think that's what really kind of ignited, it's what ignited me was
Mhm.
like, oh wow, how can we tell the story? We have this wonderful actor, Meg Elliott, who
I
playing the
love
role.
Night. Yeah.
So awesome. So
Mhm.
great. And she was like in full Duende mode.
Mhm. She was. She
But
was.
I think that's like been the great thing with the work that I've done with Cock and Bull, which, at times I'm always like, oh my God, I need to create more work. I haven't done anything. But the work we have done, people are so in it. We are in it.
They are. They are, and it's unlike anything else that I've seen in Chicago or anything else that I've seen just in theater in general. And it's yeah, the thing that I love about your embracing of Ibsen and Le Grand Guignol, that French style of shock and horror theater from the 1910s, I want to say, the turn of the
Yeah. Hmm.
10s, that is that you fully embrace taboo and you fully embrace the thing about Ibsen as well. Ibsen was scandalous back in the 19th century.
So
People were
scandalous.
pissed off at ghosts. People were so did you know I did not know this until I taught An Enemy of the People, which is his play about a whistleblower at a doctor who he's a
Yeah.
doctor, right? Yeah.
Right.
Jeremy
And
Strong played him on Broadway, where he calls out that there's the saunas of this town in Norway are basically poisoning the people who they're so toxic to the people who are in the waters, but because they're bringing in so much money, the people in control of them and the journalists who have the power to blow the whistle on it don't say anything. And then it's kind of like about mob mentality, right? Like it's
yeah.
about It's
So
about
relevant. It's still like such a
so
relevant
relevant.
play.
I
Yeah.
taught that play the night before Trump got COVID, whenever that was in 2021 or 20, and it was crazy how relevant. I mean, it's always relevant. It's gonna always,
Yeah.
so it's, yeah, so he's always embracing saying, why should this, for ghosts, it was, why should this be stigmatized? Why should extramarital affairs, um why should sexual diseases, why should arts experimentation, why should being a single mother, why should be there's all these things that he's talking about in his plays that question why certain things are stigmatized, and that was revolutionary for the time. And I
Yeah.
think that's very Duende, is that embracing of the taboo, and just like your company does, is embracing. Would you say that you guys embrace? I think you do.
Yeah,
Embrace.
I think we do. I mean, when we were creating, when we were creating a lot of work, I would say the work we were doing was kind of dangerous. I think of it as
Oh,
dangerous.
for sure.
There was always a time, and I think this is kind of connecting to Duende too. There's always a time in the process where I wake up going, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. We can't do that. And there's something that's inside of me going, I've got to do that. I've got to do that. I've got to do that. I've got to make this change. I've got to do that,
Mhm.
and that's always a big thing. Like I think when we were working on our play, we did this play Voyage. And Voyage was, it first started out really kind of these scenes I had written, and then it kind of turned into us all devising it together.
Mhm.
But it was really focused on this period of the late 18th century. And I was compelled to tell the story that I had experienced. Basically, I was in the hospital, like personally, I was in the hospital, and I had felt compelled to tell the story of like this vision that I had while I was in the hospital. And
Whoa.
and it was of this character in the play, and it was kind of this 18th century character, this woman in the 18th century. But then like all of a sudden mid process I was like, okay, we've got to now tell it in the present.
Yeah.
And it was like this weird thing that came to me, and I was like, we've got to do this. And I was like, don't do it. And I was like, and then I
Why?
had to
What
go
was
to
your
everybody and be
hesitation?
like, okay, it's now in the present too.
What was your hesitation?
It was so scary. It was
Mhm.
such a scary decision, right? And I
Mhm.
think that is part of this like whole Duende discussion is when something is really, it can be a frightening, it's that conflict of forces. And I
Mhm.
think for us, when we were devising something, it was like, um, it was that conflict of going, oh wait, I've got to now figure out how to make this make sense to everybody and
Right.
get them in. And I think the challenge from a directing standpoint, the challenge is to get everybody on board with you, right? It's not just on board. That's kind of a lame title, lame
Mhm.
word, but it's really about getting everyone kind of infected with what you're doing,
Yes.
right?
Effective.
Yeah. So they're just like completely engrossed in this. And I think we did. Like at some point, everyone was like, yeah, we've got to tell this in now a contemporary way. And so
Mhm.
that was, it's completely bizarre. Did it work at the end? No. And I think that's kind of the risk you were saying. Like, you do then get feedback or reviews and stuff, and you're like, they didn't really understand it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's like you
Yeah.
got to just, that's part of it.
For you, is the Duende more in the process or in the experience of, I don't want to say product, but the experience of the production of it?
That's good. That's a great question, Megan, because
Okay.
I,
It could be.
I think it's really, I think it's the process
Mhm.
for me. The process for me is that exorcism
Mhm.
of the
Ah.
duende. It is that getting
Oh,
that out there and
love that.
telling that.
Mhm.
That's what the process is about. And at times with the product, a lot of times it feels like such a massive relief.
Mhm.
And it never, I don't think it ever really, for me, I always see the final product. I'm like, okay, this is what it is. This is good. This is great. But it's not exactly where I wanted it to be at times.
Right.
And I think it's that reconciliation that you have to kind of deal with. But
Mhm.
for me, it's really the process.
Yeah, same. I think so too. I think it's the idea, it's because it's that physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual wrestling with the duende, is that it's the most exciting. It's the most, when you're forced to look at yourself in the truest, most unadorned way, unmoored. Like I love one of the most palpable quotes for me from Lorca's Theory and Play of the Duende, the lecture that he gave in Buenos Aires in 1933, was when he said, the Duende knows neither map nor discipline, or when you're searching for the Duende, there's no map or discipline. And I find that that's most true when you're just physically in that, you get lost in that what the playwright Susan Laurie Parks says, the dance of playwriting,
Mhm.
or that you have to dance out your characters. So you're physically, because a lot of people think, well, I don't know. Maybe I did before became a writer. I think a lot of people think that writers are just sitting there, they're in their heads. But for me, I like to physicalize. I get up, I dance, I act out the the characters. I don't know, does that play a role for you? Does it become more realized when you are rehearsing and getting everything up on its feet? And is the duende, I don't know, is there anything lost from that exorcism when you are conjuring the duende, and then when you have to physicalize it with others? Is there anything lost, or does it become more saturated with that
I,
infection?
I I think you become more saturated with it, and it's more about that experience. Like you start to have new revelations and discoveries,
Mhm.
right? As scenes are being created, as characters are being developed, revelations are happening throughout the whole
Right.
process. And ideally, those revelations are bringing light to whatever you need to
Mhm.
expel or what story you need to tell. So, and I think like with you as a playwright, I think it's interesting. I kind of wonder, like, so do you find then like the editing process difficult for you once you've kind of, is that like a hard part for
It's the
you?
hardest part for me. My brain, right? It's hard. I'm so about the inspiration. Structure has always been difficult for me, but I do think there is a certain duende to the rewriting, because it's another thing, you're forced to look at what you created. It's like it's like the beat poets like Jack Kerouac, that they were criticized. They were idolized for how spontaneous they were, and how they would go on these drug fueled just journeys of writing and writing and writing and just letting everything out, that confessional testimonial aspect, like what Allen Ginsberg did when he wrote Howl. And but then they were criticized for it being gibberish afterwards. So
Right.
they didn't really, from to my knowledge, they didn't really edit after. They just were like, this process is what's spiritual. This is the truth. It's unedited, it's unadorned. And for me, I think with playwriting, I think there's some plays that are like that, but they're not going to get produced, really. I think you have to rewrite. And I think it because I think of plays as a live animal, like an animal, that they're alive, that you do have to groom it, you have to give it a bath, you have to cut its fur a little bit, and shape it,
Right, right.
put a little bow on it sometimes, maybe. Or you could just leave it wild, but you do have to reflect. But so for me, it's that reflection, because my brain works so emotionally and viscerally that it's a bit harder for me to organize them. But that's why I love collaborating with people like you and Nathan and some other directors, that Ricky Martinez in Florida. Like there's a directors that really understand me and run. That's what I think is great about having Duende, is having somebody else who understands that Duende and can kind of harness it for the better. And I think that's why we work so well, because we have both the inspiration and the harnessing power.
Yeah. I love what you say about kind of grooming or kind of taming something.
Mhm.
That is the hard part of the process to get it. I don't know, is it kind of trying to get it palpable for an audience, or
Right.
is it I'm not sure what it is, but that can be kind of hard to do, you
It
know.
is.
And I would say there's definitely been stuff I've done, that have no duende.
Really?
And I think you just have to, it's just kind of the nature of the beast, right? It's like kind
Mhm.
of like if you're directing work, you're not ever always going to have full duende and everything. Sometimes you got to pay the bills. But I
No,
mean,
no full Duende.
yeah, no full duende. But yeah, I think that's part of it. Yeah.
Okay. So wait, so have you said that you experienced it with other, you've never really experienced it when you've created yourself? Have you ever felt your own personal duende or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole process is for me. I mean, I think when
Okay.
I'm doing it, yeah, it's all that whole process is for me, like the duende.
Right.
And then and then I think definitely when I've seen other people's work too, I can see that.
Right, right. That's so that's so cool that you were in Spain and that you got to experience that. Did you find it and the presence of the duende in anything besides the flamenco? Was there anything else in Spain that you felt? 'Cause Laura
Um,
says that it's the spirit of the earth there, and that in Spain the most the dead are the most alive in Spain. So
oh, that's really interesting. There is an energy there. There's a vibe, there's some great, artists in general, just yeah,
my
hello,
Almodovar, Penelope
Pedro
Cruz,
Almodovar. Yeah.
those are
Um, that's Pedro and, is Pedro Almodovar's full Duende, right? I mean, we
both,
both know this, full
yeah,
Duende.
we're Almodovar stands,
Yeah.
idolize him.
Um, yes. That's a good example of like somebody's work I see. I see a lot of it in film of like Pedro
Yeah,
Almodovar,
okay,
and
yeah.
then yeah, um
Which film would you say has of his has the most duende?
for me, Voltaire is really,
Oh, me too!
yeah,
Dude, me too!
th that is an incredible piece to me. Also Broken Embraces.
I still need to see that.
I could literally go on with this. All About My Mother.
Yes, classic.
you know um
That's the one he won
and
the Oscar for, right? All
yeah,
about
I think, yeah.
Mhm.
And I think what's interesting, 'cause you have a picture of Penelope Cruz behind you with Pedro Almodovar. And what I love about them is their
Oh my god, it's
relationship
that.
together.
Yeah. Except I'm not an actress.
And you see this a lot, like with, who's the other filmmaker I'm thinking of is Yorgos Lanthimos.
Mhm,
Is that, am I saying that right?
mhm.
And Emma Stone,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
their connection, right? And you know what I think is interesting is at times you'll hear, and I think we see this a lot in the media, they'll say, Penelope Cruz is Pedro's muse.
Mhm.
Emma Stone is his muse.
Mhm.
I hate that term. I think it's
Mm.
just the worst
That's what
because,
Lorca says in the lecture. He says, "Reject the muse.
yeah,
The angel, kick the muse to the curb."
because it's not that. It's two people who are experiencing full duende,
Mhm.
but in different forms,
I love
right?
that.
And that's why they have that connection together. Like Penelope Cruz and Pedro Almodovar have that connection because they're both on the same wavelength,
Mhm.
just in different forms. And I think the same with Emma Stone in um, Yorgos. Am I saying that right? Yorgos
Yeah, mhm,
Lanthimos? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, that the same relationship with that too.
right.
And with, who's I'm a huge Jenna Rollins fan. Jenna Rollins and John Cassavetes, their films, I mean, that
I just
is
watched
Duende.
Mike, I just watched on Criterion opening night.
Amazing.
I had to watch that in parts, dude. It was so it was almost too much duende for me
It
because
is fully intense. There's not a lot of grooming of that, right? Like I think there's not a lot of like editing of that.
Mhm,
Such an incredible film. Women Under the Influence. I mean,
mhm,
that's also a great example of like what you could see with Duende.
mhm.
And then for me, other artists I've seen, when I think of it, I think of Complicite, that company.
Oh, the
Um,
clowning in Paris?
yeah,
Clowning
yeah.
company? Mhm.
I saw one of their pieces, oh my gosh, 30 years ago in London, and The Three Lives of Lucy Cabral, and that changed my whole world.
Why?
It
How?
was it was just that is a piece. Their work in general, I think experiencing Duende. The play is really about telling the story of this character, but it's told really through a lot of physicality, really incredible embodiment of character, and it was just told in such an incredible physical way. I'd never seen anything like it.
Mhm,
And I think that piece is something that always stuck out to me as, when you talk about Duende, that's a full Duende piece of having to expel something from you that you've got to tell the story. You're compelled to tell a story.
right. Fascinating. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have Almodovar, we have John Cassavetes, we have Yorgos Lanthimos. What would you say like this week or today or just very recently, what have you come across recently that has an interesting duende to you? It doesn't have to
Oh,
be art per se, it can be just an experience or an aspect of our culture or
yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I have any. What have you experienced?
well, hmm. Let me take a sip of my duende drink. Get that. Well, speaking of food, I think of food recently, like I've been baking. Guess what's on tonight? The first episode of the new season of the Great British Bake Off.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Well,
Yes.
food, you can definitely
Yeah,
see
food.
see Duende in food. I'm a big food person, and
Yeah.
I love going someplace and just if I'm like, wow, this chef is
You were going to be a
just
chef, right? Or you went to culinary?
well. I was interested in going to culinary school a long time ago, Megan.
Mhm.
Not to age myself, but like a long. I was on the cusp of like, do I go to culinary school or do I go um, get an MFA in directing?
Right.
And I decided to go get an MFA in directing.
Mm.
Um, but I've always kind of kept up my kind of culinary
So
interest.
which flavors have duende to you? What does duende taste like?
I think it's really a combination of somebody who has a really interesting combination. Where you can have food sometimes and you can taste somebody's duende in their food. And I
Mhm.
think it's really when you're like, oh man, this is just, I always say food is like incredible when I'm completely silent. When I've like stopped talking, that it's like that is when it is absolute full duende. But like even this past during the pandemic, I decided to become. How could I really focus on becoming a very good Mexican cook? Was kind of
Ooh.
my focus,
Mhm.
and I was like, my mom was a great cook. My mom was from Mexico, and how could I really embrace that? So I really took that on as a challenge of really and just the process of real Mexican cooking is just amazing. I was in Mexico City recently and
Yeah.
experienced some of the best food.
Well, what's the best one?
Oh my God, just like really complex moles and that
Mm.
were really delicious. I had this incredible like ceviche tostada that is just so delicious. There was this mole. Oh, there was a wonderful at this place. It was like a tamale, but like kind of combined with corn and cheese. And it was just so, I mean, it was just so, I get very excited
Different.
about
How
food.
is it different from I can see you having this reaction to remembering it. Is it
Yeah.
an emotional thing when you taste those flavors, or is it is it just purely physical, or what is it about eating that food in Mexico that makes the flavors more duende for you?
I think I think when you're in Mexico in general, you're kind of like already in that mindset, right? Of you're like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I always say like when you go to visit a country, when I first started like traveling places, I'd go to some really incredible restaurants, but
Mm.
you can't understand the food unless you know the basics of the food. So
Mhm.
you can't understand a deconstructed food if you don't know the basics of the culture of the food of the community or
Right,
the
right.
culture, right? Right.
Mhm,
So it's interesting to have an understanding of the basics of Mexican food, just from my own background and being from Texas.
mhm,
Um, and now I could get it when something's like a deconstructed, when something's deconstructed in a way. Well, we ate at some restaurant that had it was incredible. It was like tostadas, but they were made from um, seaweed. Like
ooh,
it was like a seaweed. It was like a take on a tostada, but it was made from like seaweed. So just I love that kind of like, oh, this is
wait,
so
the shell
interesting.
was made of sea
Yes, yes,
Whoa, how do they
yeah.
even do that?
Yeah, where you're like, exactly. I think that's part of the exciting part is being like, how did somebody do this? How did they come up with this? And I think
Mm.
they'd have to be in like full Duende mode to be like, I'm going to try this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think it's the same thing when we're creating theater and creating work. It's like being like, I'm going to experiment and try this. And people may
yeah,
not like it,
yeah,
but it doesn't really matter in a way, you
right.
know?
So that's an interesting that makes me think of performing the duende of food. Is there a movie or any work of art that combines both the culinary and the storytelling aspect of of that process, that excites you in a way? Like, is there a recent or not recent, but just any type of work that captures that process of creating that culinary magic that
Yeah, I just saw an incredible film. Maybe you recommended this film to me, A Taste of Things
yeah, I
with
did.
Julia Binoche. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
my friend Giselle recommended that. Yeah.
What an amazing film.
French
Right.
cooking uh,
French cooking, the
in the
intricacies
19th
of,
century.
yeah, like 19th century French cooking and like the intricacies of it
Mhm.
and just like the attention to detail of the cinematography and like was so incredible. We were like,
Well,
why
and
am I so enraptured in this?
yeah,
Yeah.
because the first what half hour, 45 minutes is just them cooking.
Yeah. It's just them
And
like preparing a meal.
yeah, I could almost taste it. It was like the sensorial experience was coming off the screen.
Right.
And it was
Yeah.
unadorned. It was almost like they lived. It was like they lived in, it wasn't like they were living and breathing their food and their cooking and the art of that.
Right. And it was so laborious too,
Yeah.
like me and I have a good friend of mine, and we always say like Mexican cooking is like so laborious. And it was a way to like really entrap women, but because it's like,
Whoa.
you know, but really in reality, it's laborious because you're making so many like salsas or salsitas or mole. It's very time consuming where you're like, it takes so many steps in the end product. You're like, this is it. And it's a
So
little,
it's
and
like,
that's what I felt from that film. Yeah. But you're just like so you've got to be in full Duende mode, I think, to be able to now create some of that stuff. Um,
that reminds me of like Water for Chocolate. When you're laboring over it, it's like your feelings go into that movie, the book and the movie,
yes,
like
yeah,
feelings go into that process, and then you can taste it. The people who are have the gift of consuming that labor, that gift of labor that you gave them, you can taste that. I love
yeah.
that.
I think that's exciting to think about.
Mhm. All right. Okay. So great. So the next thing I wanted to do is the first podcast I did Duende or No Duende, a game called Duende or No Duende. But this time I want to do try a new game called, well, not game, but just a segment called Duende Versus. So
Okay,
we have two things, and I want you to tell me which you think has more Duende for you. Okay, so
okay. Okay, okay.
so the first one, well, we've kind of already talked about them a little bit because the first one I was going to say was because we're both such fans of the Great British Bake Off. But it's right. You are right.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
What is which week do you think has more duende for you? Pastry week or bread week or cake week? Or is there one week that you look forward to more because it has more duende for you?
I would say that's interesting. I think the probably pastry week is really, I think, a good example of it because everyone is so ready to show all the skills they've been studying on their own.
Mhm.
I think bread week they're always kind of thrown off, right? They
Yeah.
don't really know what to do. But I think pastry week they're all like, oh my God, that you can tell they've all been practicing how to make, puff pastry and they've been trying all these different things at home.
Mhm.
So I think they're like, they're talking about expelling something. They're like, we're ready to get
Yeah.
all this out.
Yeah. And that's it's not controversial, but it's it's because it's non-controversial. That show is so non-controversial. Does it even have duende? I don't know. But because it's so good-natured and there's no real sense of competition, like the competition is more with yourself. So I guess that is the duende in it because I love that show because I don't know about you, but I don't really watch reality shows or competition shows that much. But I love that one because it's more about the joy of doing it, even though they're stressed out about it. But because they're not really mean to each other, they're not in competition with each other. They are technically, but they're always very supportive of each other. And I guess I don't know, is there duende to that? I guess it's more within themselves and their
Yeah,
own.
I think maybe it's their own personal reaction to
Yeah.
it, but maybe there's not Duende in that show.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I agree that pastry week is always the most intense because it's I don't know how they come up with those complex ever how it can hold everything together. That's the challenge, right?
Yeah,
Do you make pastries?
no.
No.
I, I don't do any baking stuff. It has to be too precise. I'm not.
Really? I
Yeah.
only bake. I don't really cook. I only bake and I'm never precise.
Really?
I'm
Oh.
never precise. I just like throw it in.
You're like, whatever.
Yeah. Homemadey. I like to say it's homemadey. Um, but yeah, okay. Okay. So the next one is there's been this the past, usually during, well, I guess not maybe just during spooky season, but I've been noticing that a lot of film directors are taking on their version of classics. That's been true forever, but I feel like today when the film industry is so talk about not wanting to take risks. The film industry is so wanting to take original IP, intellectual properties, yeah, and make something new like this director's version of it. And so coming out soon is Robert Eggers' version of Nosferatu, and
Okay.
then also Emerald Fennell, who did Saltburn and Promising Young Woman. She's doing a version of Wuthering Heights. So I don't know. Are you familiar with both of those? Which one do you think, the Brontes or Bram Stoker? Which one do you think has more
More
dwell?
Duende.
Yeah. Or
That's interesting. As a child, I went as the vampire from Nosferatu
You
when I
did?
was about 11
Are
years
there
old.
pictures? I want to see pictures. Are there pictures?
Maybe, but that was, and I was so scared of the vampire from Nosferatu. Um,
But I love that you were scared of him, but then you went as him for
I
your
had to go as him. Yeah. I like forced myself to go as him.
that is so Duende. I love that. You were embracing it as a
I
child.
was always constantly having this battle of wills. Um, Wait, okay, so which one is more compelling? Well,
Well,
there's something.
more possibility for all that Duende stuff we were talking about before.
I'm gonna say Wuthering Heights.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Wuthering Heights, the Nosferatu seems a bit like, it seems kind of logical that
Hmm.
somebody would be like, okay, I've got to do this. I think if there's something about like the idea of like, how many things of Wuthering Heights have we seen? So it's kind of like, I think that's really interesting to see, like, that could have more Duende, I think, than the Nosferatu.
Because there's more room to
There's more room to explore, right? There's more room to, when Wuthering Heights, I think of the Kate Bush song, Wuthering Heights,
yes.
also recorded by Kate Bush and Pat Benatar. And the battle of those two songs,
Yes.
those two versions.
Yes.
So that
Ooh,
makes me think of which one of those has more Duende.
yes. I'll ask you. So which one do you think? Well, of course you're going to say Pat Benatar, right?
I was going to say Pat
You
Benatar,
guys, Pat
yes.
Benatar Chris is a huge Pat Benatar fan.
Huge,
Huge.
huge. And that is a great example of Duende, though, because okay, the Kate Bush version of Wuthering Heights is really cool when you hear like that she wrote the song. Kate Bush wrote the song, right? So the lyrics are
Isn't she
really,
19 years old? She was
yeah,
only 19. That's
the
yeah,
lyrics are so cool, right?
so
But
cool.
then I don't think her recording, and this is very controversial in this topic, Megan. I think Pat's recording is absolutely full Duende. Even though I think Pat would say it's much more of a techno, I think she was technically sounds great in it. She's full Duende in it. She's so into it because she heard the song somewhere and was like, oh my God, what is this song? I've got to record it. And her singing of it is absolute full Duende. So I think that's an interesting
Why?
connection.
What about it is
I think
Duende?
she's got to get it out. She's got
Hmm.
to like expel this. She's got to like, I think I read somewhere about like talking about expelling something. Like I think Patty Lupone said somewhere, like singing to her. She said to sing well, you've got to imagine like having a glob of peanut butter in your throat and trying to get it to the back of the theater. And I think
Oh, that's so perfect.
that's like a technical idea of singing, but I think what Pat Benatar brings to Wuthering Heights is it's this emotional
The
duende that's
vocal excerpt. Yes.
she's gotta exercise this from herself in that version of the song.
And what about Wuthering Heights? What about that song? The story of that song, do you think compelled Pat to have that incredible vocal exorcism?
I think it's really just the story of this longing of this lost love, right? It's a very it's like it's about a ghost, really, and it's like kind of this lost
Doom,
love.
right? Doom.
Yeah, kind of this doom, and I think it's just that's kind of what's compelling about it. Like having to tell somebody's story in a way. It's such an unusual song. The lyrics are so unusual, you
Yeah.
know. Um, but so I think that's an interesting
Ooh,
comparison of Duende. Yeah.
yes. I've listened to, I think I've listened to it once, but I've been just having the Kate Bush one on repeat, but I'm excited to listen to the Pat Benatar one now.
Yes,
Is that
Megan, you got
true?
to.
It's the Duende of Pat Benatar. Is that true for most of her work? Is it the same that you feel like she has this story that she needs to get out, or is there something else about her that has Duende for you?
I think that that is like a part of it. Like I think definitely she has some songs that are no Duende, no Duende, but then some, but then a lot, which are a lot of kind of like B-side songs, right? Which are usually are with artists, right? They're the songs they're really passionate about. That I think there's some great, I think a lot of her work, she's in that mode
Hmm.
of, especially seeing her live is when you see her like in full Duende mode, where she is completely so connected
Hmm.
to this music and songs and lyrics that she has to get these out. I think that's what's always really kind of connected me.
And the Duende, it's lasted for so long, right? She's 70?
Oh my God, she's 71 years old.
My
Yeah.
God. How many
I
times have you
mean,
seen her live?
I've seen her too many times.
Mm. Many.
45 times.
Wow. That's so inspiring.
Yeah. Well, is it? Yeah, it is. But I think a lot of it was really, that I've been to some, that's a lot of concerts. But I've
Could have
been to
consulted with you for the musical.
I know they should have. They really should have. I've seen her sometimes definitely where I'm like, oh my God, she's transported to another place right now. Like,
Wow.
sure, she's so connected to what she's singing.
Astral projection musical.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what has always kept me really
Have
connected.
you ever astral project, or have you ever had an out of body experience watching her?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. I'm sure.
You're flying over her at the concert, like, hi, Pat. Hi, thank you for this out.
Hi, thank you.
Flying. Wow.
I probably have. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited to listen to that song now. Okay, so all right. Well, it's been almost an hour, I think.
What? It's gone by
Lost
so
track of
fast.
time. Yeah. So the thing that I like to do at the end, well, I say it like I've done it a million times. I've done it once. But I want to end the hour, the conversation with a reflection on any duende discoveries. Did you discover anything about duende in yourself or your perception of duende throughout this hour?
Yeah, I think I think what you talked about the idea of the response to Duende of like, does that impact your work? That an audience or reviews, critics seeing your work, and how does that impact how you kind of come in contact with Duende?
Hmm.
Essentially, you know what I mean? Like, I think at times what happens, you mean, and this is just, it's not really, if you're creating work and you're producing work, at times you're going, how are people going to perceive this?
Hmm.
Right. So I'm wondering, like, do you then make decisions? Are you making decisions? When do you make decisions that are focused on the production aspect, the producing aspect, and are disconnected to the Duende?
Hmm.
Which is the better choice? You,
Right.
I think at times I've definitely have been in the room and gone, oh, we should do this. But maybe it's been more on the production side
Right,
as
right.
opposed to me going, I've got to reconnect to the Duende of this. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of something interesting to
Do you
think
have any
about.
tools for that? Like if you're in the rehearsal room and you're trying to help your actors or your designers or even just yourself or a writer, if you're working with a writer, do you have any tools as the director to help others reconnect to the duende?
Um, I usually do, and it's for me, it's kind of finding something else that ignites them. Like
Mhm.
a lot of times it's outside of what you're working on.
Right, right.
So it's like some other third party something. It could be like this is this incredible, song I've heard, or this incredible, you've got to go see this exhibit at the, Museum of Contemporary Art because it is so connected to the work we're doing.
Right,
And
right.
I think it's something disconnected to what you're actually working on, and it reconnects people.
Hmm.
I think that's something, and I talk a lot about that a lot whenever I'm teaching students or working with students too, is like, at times in the world of theater, we can get really engrossed in just that medium and we're obsessed with just theater. But in reality, we've got to look outside of it and be inspired from other mediums and other sources. And that can help, kind of feed our creativity and ignite us.
For sure. For sure. Because it's like it activates another part of that duende brain. Or if
Right.
you're, because it kind of relaxes the struggle a little bit and ignites another limb of the duende bot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. It
so
like
that it,
cultivates the enthusiasm, right?
yeah,
Doesn't Anne Bogart says that, I think. Cultivating the enthusiasm. And
consistency.
I think that's I think for me that really means it's reconnecting to the duende, right? You can think you
Yes.
use both those terms interchangeably.
Yes. I love that. Thanks,
Megan,
Steve. This has
thank
been
you so
so
much.
insightful. You are
Thanks
my
for having me.
original duende supporter, enthusiastic, encourager, experimenter, visionary. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Megan is full duende.
I love you.
Okay,
Oh,
bye.
so wait.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
So do you want Cock and Bull on Instagram? It's just Cock and Bull Arts, or what is it?
Yes, cock and bull. It's at Cock and Bull.
Okay.
Yeah.
And and um and they'll just find you through
I'm
there.
looking at yeah, Cock and Bull is on Instagram. We also have a website, cockandbullarts.org.
Really cool website. I love the design.
Yeah,
We are
cockandbullarts.org. And
old.
hopefully we'll be doing something soon.
Yes. I love the podcast that you guys did and that interactive digital experience over the when we were in
Oh,
lockdown.
the octopus. Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, hopefully something else will happen soon.
Awesome.
Again, it's forcing me to connect to the Duende.
Yes. Let's all connect to the Duende. Thanks,
Okay,
Stu. Thanks
bye,
for the
Megan.
invitation.
See ya.
Bye.